Hi, arrangers and composers and jazz fans. Today I want to talk about writing for soprano saxophone. Being a saxophone it was invented by Adolph Sax and has the same written range and fingerings as all the other saxophones, low B flat to high F. It's pitched in B flat and it sounds an octave higher than the tenor saxophone. And it comes in two shapes. There's a curved shape that looks like a miniature version of an alto saxophone. That's less popular. You see that a lot less, I think. Mostly soprano players have used a straight soprano, which looks kind of like a metal version of a clarinet, although it's a saxophone, it has a saxophone fingerings. Coltrane, if you've seen pictures of Coltrane, that's what he plays. Johnny Hodges played the straight soprano, so did Sidney Bechet, Jerome Richardson and Jerry Dodgen, with Thad Jones and Mel Lewis, and also with my band, they played the straight. Bob Wilbur is probably the most famous one I know. They played the curved soprano. They sound pretty much the same. The thing about the soprano is it's a little more pungent. It's got this pungency that makes it different from the alto saxophone. So you could pick it out right away. It's kind of like comparing an oboe to a clarinet, so like that. The sopranos are not pitched very well when you get them. Most of the ones that have been manufactured, there's pitch problems. They're a little out of tune. It's hard to find one that's got good pitch. So it makes it a little difficult for players. Jerome Richardson had just this really great silver soprano that was really in tune, and when he died, Jerry Dodgen inherited it. So I had a lot of years of hearing that instrument. And it was unusual because it was so well in tune. When I'm writing saxophone unisons and there's soprano in this section, I generally write the soprano an octave above the alto, so that it gets a soprano sound. If you write it in unison with the alto, the alto will kind of take some of that pungency out of the soprano sound. The soprano is softer than the other saxophones, so when you're performing music that's got soprano lead, very often you'll need to say to the other saxophone players for them to play a little softer. It's kind of like when there's clarinet lead, saxophones can't play as loud as they would if it was alto lead. Well, it's the same thing. Soprano is a little softer than an alto. And because of that, a lot of times it just makes an easier blend if there's a fourth or a fifth between the soprano and then the alto underneath it, rather than a second or a third. However, there's a lot of the earlier music where it's written in close position, where the soprano is a third above the alto. The low D down to B flat at the bottom of the instrument can sound like a duck. So players very often they don't master that. But there's recordings of Johnny Hodges with Duke Ellington where he plays right down to the bottom of the instrument with just a beautiful sound. So it is possible. So players need to work on that. We rarely write those notes down at the bottom, or the notes all the way at the top of the range. Generally E flat's probably maybe an E natural, but generally E flat's about as high as I go. I don't usually write E or F, and F sharp I've never written. I don't even know if there's an F sharp on the instrument. It depends on when it was made, I think. The older instruments don't have F sharps, that's for sure. In fact, I'm not even sure they have a high F on some of the ones that were made in the 20s. So since I never write for them up there anyway, it hasn't come up. Soprano was popular in the 1920s. You hear like Guy Lombardo, his band, which was formed in the 1920s, and then they continued to play in that same style. Carmen Lombardo, who was Guy's brother, he played lead alto and soprano. I always thought that was pretty corny, but Duke Ellington's band, he used soprano in the 1920s and in the 1930s. Johnny Hodges was a wonderful soprano player. His idol was Sidney Bechet. Actually, Bechet played with Duke one summer in 1925, and they loved what Bechet did, and then that contributed a lot to the style of how the saxophones in that band played. Johnny Hodges, when he joined the band later, his idol was Bechet, and when they went to record a feature number where Hodges had a solo chorus on the Sheik of Araby, the night before the recording session, Hodges went to his teacher's house, to Bechet's house, and took a lesson from Bechet so he could learn to play the solo on the Sheik, and it sounds very much like Bechet, what he plays. It's improvised, but it's really, well, the Sheik of Araby. You definitely want to check that recording out. It's one of the great soprano solos of all time. Ellington wrote soprano lead in the saxophone section as well. In the 1930s, a famous recording is Daybreak Express. I highly recommend that. It's got a solo chorus with soprano lead, and it's voiced in close position. So it's got soprano, alto, and tenor, and they're all voiced in close position. It's just 4 saxophones. I recommend that you listen to that. It's outstanding, technically difficult as well. Another much simpler soli from a couple of years later is Merry-Go-Round. It's 1935. There's one chorus of blues with soprano lead, and they just play a scale pattern. And it's all in close position. Again, soprano, alto, tenor, same thing. All in close position, and it gets up to like, it's you listen to Hodges' lead on the soprano, and it's such a terrific, it's such a warm tone. Sopranos can tend to be harsh, but when he plays it, it's very warm. In 1941, Hodges gave Duke an ultimatum. He said, you've got me playing most of the lead now, and I play a solo on almost every tune, and I'm playing the alto and the soprano, and you want me to play clarinet on a few things, and something's got to go. Duke said, okay, well, we won't use the soprano anymore. And that was it. Hodges never played soprano again after 1941, until Duke wrote the New Orleans Suite, and he wrote one movement, and it's called Portrait of Sidney Bechet. And it was written for Hodges to play on soprano. Hodges said, for that, I will get my soprano out of mothballs, and I'll do it. Unfortunately, he died a day or two before the recording, and so we never got to hear him play the soprano again. Charlie Barnett played soprano in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s. He had a big band, and he's about the only fairly modern band that did that. Until Coltrane, 1960s, Coltrane started recording on the soprano, and I'm sure you know my favorite things. If you don't, you should check it out. It's a very famous recording. So Coltrane's sound of soprano is much harsher Johnny Hodges. And most modern players play it more like Coltrane. Thad Jones started writing for a soprano lead for his own band in 1966. And I encourage you to listen to Don't Get Sassy. There's a saxophone solo on that. 16 bars, and it's really excellent. Thad voices the saxophones with the soprano lead. He uses 5-part voicings with the drop 2, so that there's always usually about a fourth between the soprano and the next voice down. Sometimes a third, but usually a fourth, maybe even a fifth. Another and even more well-known saxophone solo with soprano lead from Thad is The Groove Merchant. It's got a few choruses of saxophone solo, and it's outstanding. I was actually at the Vanguard when the copyist brought the chart in, and the band read it down for the first time right on the gig. The chart was not complete; it was just had the melody chorus and the saxophone solo, and they played it, and then they improvised a bit, and then they played the melody out. They liked it so much on the second set that they did it again on the third set. It sounded so great; it was really exciting. Later on, a week or two later, he finished the chart, and you can hear the recording of it. It's very good. You'll notice that they started very soft. It's very that with soprano lead. That's a very nice effect because the soprano is a softer instrument than the alto, so it's very natural to do that. I would say that I mostly write alto lead. Occasionally, I'll write for soprano. There might only be a few numbers, 1, 2, or 3 numbers in a whole evening's worth of music that I do with soprano lead. So alto lead is really mostly the sound that you'll hear with big bands. But I think soprano is a good alternative. It's very different from clarinet lead. It's a saxophone. So I encourage you to check out these examples and give it a shot in your own writing. See you soon. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.